Well, yesterday, as we began looking at the first six verses of Proverbs and verses 1 through 6 of chapter 1, I talked a lot about what wisdom was and how we attain it. And one of the key things I emphasized was that wisdom comes as a consequence of living a disciplined life. Wisdom isn't just something that comes to you in the moment, although there are momentary flashes of insight and wisdom. But basically, to have a character that is defined as being wise and insightful comes because you have employed certain disciplines. And for us, it's the disciplines of the word and in prayer. It's a discipline of sitting under teaching and being in fellowship, the kind of things that really become the priorities. And that's really what we talk about disciplines. It's really sitting down and saying, what are the most important things in my life? How am I spending the irreplaceable minutes and seconds and hours and days that really make up my life? I mean, we each have like 26,000 days that we can live out, and they're finite. You run out of time. And so how can I spend that time in the most beneficial way? How can I invest my time? And we will find there are many proverbs talk about financial advice and how we should handle our money. But the most important thing we're told over and over again, as we studied before, more important than silver and gold and all those treasures, is wisdom. How do we get it? And the problem is, if you live an undisciplined life, you'll never really live a wise life. I mean, you may be a very bright person, a very clever person, a very charming person, but because you don't have a discipline in your life, you're going to find that the wheels often come off your cart at inopportune times and in very impactful ways. And so the wise man, he looks at his life and he lives it in a disciplined way, and beginning with spiritual disciplines. And then it begins to apply to other things. I mean, there are things that I eat and don't eat because I know that those things that I don't eat aren't good for me. And I'm always trying to make sure I'm focusing on the nutritional issues that I have. And I also know that there's a danger. It's very easy for me to overeat, as it is for most people. And so there are certain things I have to just, put a limit on and say, I can't do more than this. And this is where people, again, get into physical and health issues because they aren't really taking care of themselves. And as I get older, I discover that I have certain proclivities for certain kind of problems that I just need to really be watching very, very carefully. I can't eat a lot of this kind of food, even though I may like them. And it may be fine for you, but it affects my body differently. And that's why, some people struggle with gluten, some people struggle with sugar, some people struggle with all sorts of things, that it's just a problem. I have a problem with proteins. I mean, I have to be careful that I eat the right kind of proteins and I don't eat the wrong kind of proteins because it has a very adverse effect upon my body. So, it's part of that discipline. And there's certain proteins, especially that protein that goes moo, that I really like, and I have to be very careful with that. But there again, it hovers in every way, the same way that I have to do for certain physical exercises and stretching and things in order to keep myself flexible and movable. These are disciplines. And you find that but the key to becoming a disciplined person is to begin by becoming spiritually disciplined, inviting God to help you, to teach you, and open your eyes to the Word. And that's why in verse 7, and I want to read on through this whole passage all the way down to let me see, where do we want to go? All the way down to verse 19, if you'll bear with me. It says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline." So he's beginning to make a contrast here now between the wise man and the fool. And he says, "Listen, my son, to your father's instructions, and do not forsake your mother's learning. They will be a garland around your head, and a chain adorn your neck. My son, if sinners entice you, do not give in to them. If they say, 'Come along with us and let us lie in wait for someone's blood. Let's waylay some harmless soul. Let's swallow them alive like the grave and whole like those who go down to the pit. We will get all sorts of valuable things and fill our houses with plunder. Throw in your lot with us and we will share a common purse.' Again, he says, 'My son, do not go along with them. Do not set foot on their paths, for their feet rush into sin and they are swift to shed blood.' And it goes on to say, how useless to spread a net in full view of the birds. These men will lie in wait for their own blood. They waylay only themselves. Such is the end of all who go after ill-gotten gain. It takes away the lives of those who get it. Now, here again, he contrasts the way of the wise, and he says, son, listen to the instructions that you've been given by your mother and by your father. Now, I know some of you are saying, well, my parents weren't very wise, and they didn't give me really good advice. I think that's why Jesus said, don't call any man on earth your father, for you have only one father, and he is in heaven. My father gave me good advice in certain ways. There's other ways that he advised me that when I became a Christian, I realized wasn't the way of the Lord. I was able to discern that difference because I knew what the Bible said. So I loved my dad, and I showed him respect. I didn't even ask his advice, but I would always follow what the Lord told me. And then afterwards, when my dad asked me how it worked out, I'd say it worked out great, and he felt good. But the point was, I was listening to God, and I was listening to his word. So, as Solomon's saying, he's got King David as his father, and we don't know much about Bathsheba as his mother, but we know that they probably had better advice than we may have gotten from our parents. And that's the whole point. When you know you have good advice from people who can be depended on. I had a boss, old Joe McDonald. He used to sit and talk to me when I worked for him when I was going through college, and I found him really an insightful and wise guy, and I really paid attention to what he had to say. And so I think it's important that we have those mentors, those people who are influential in our life, that we listen to them, we take their advice, and we generally will benefit as a result of having paid close attention to what they have to say. But he says you have to understand that if you do this, it'll be like a garland around your head. In other words, this flowery bow with all of its sweet fragrances. And he says it'll be like a necklace, basically a sign of wealth and prosperity and blessing, because people wore necklaces to indicate their positions of power. He said this will basically lead to a life that will be pleasant, a life that will be blessed, a life that will be empowered. And he said, because what you're going to find is that there are going to be people who are going to try to entice you to do the wrong thing. And he says, they may look smart, they may look like they've got it together, but they are total fools because they're chasing after their own destruction. And that's really kind of a wild, hard thing or important thing, because I think about, I'm fascinated by studying TV commercials, quite honestly. Because I listen to them and I try to basically deconstruct what they have to say, and I realize how they're so careful in making promises that aren't really promises, or making claims that aren't really validly supported. And they're trying to induce you to purchase something that you probably don't need, and when you get it, you probably won't even like it. And you'll wonder, why did I do that? And the reason is because you allowed yourself to be enticed. That's my whole grub with the whole advertising world, is that it's all designed to get you to buy something that you probably don't need and eventually won't want, and throw your good money after it instead of putting it to use in some more useful way. But that's true of all sorts of things, especially young people. I remember as a young person being enticed, being invited. That's how I got into drug, sex, rock and roll, and all the other things that Christ set me free from eventually, is because I was enticed to do it. I was told that this would make me happy, it would be fulfilling. And he said, basically, you need to understand that there are people out there who are going to lie to you, and they're going to do it with such sincerity. I think my brother, very interestingly, we were talking about some person in our life, and he made the comment to me. He said, they're incredibly charming, very bright, and very dangerous. I thought, it's interesting to throw dangerous at the end of that, because he said, that they really are enjoyable to be around. They're so pleasant. Most narcissistic personalities are very charming at the moment. And they tend to be, especially if they're really bright and charming, they can really draw you in, but they can entangle you in stuff that you don't want to be entangled in. They can lead you astray. And that's why he said you need to be aware of these kind of people, that there are people out there who will lie to you. And they will do it intentionally and often because they're really not concerned about the consequences. They're only concerned about getting praise and riches and the rest of the stuff for themselves. They want power, they want position, they want pleasure, they want all the possessions they can get their hands on. They're worshipers of Baal. They want the 4 Ps, and some people are just not very bright and not very clever and not very charming, and you can spot those people a mile away. Other people are incredibly charming, and they are the ones who oftentimes are very successful, and they tell you, if you just give your money to me, if you just trust your time and your energy to me, you just follow after me, you'll experience great and wonderful things. The wise man sits back and he contemplates their offer. He doesn't just jump in it. In fact, I've had many of these kind of things, and I've sat and prayed over it and said, Lord, what do you want me to do? And I've heard God very clearly say to me, this isn't for you, walk away. And that's the thing that Solomon was saying to his son. Don't go along with them. He said, don't follow their path. Because he said, the end of those who get ill-gotten gain is always bad. And catch that phrase, ill-gotten gain. In other words, they've wanted to take possession of something that they don't have a right to and they don't deserve. They don't want to have to work for it. They want to be able to lift it from you. Well, personally, I found that people are dishonest, work very hard at being dishonest. But nonetheless, he says, don't follow these people. Always have that wariness of saying, okay, where's the beef, if you will? Because there's a lot of people who will give you soy milk instead of cow's milk. And there's a big difference. Well, not the greatest illustration, but we'll stop there. We'll continue talking about this as we move on tomorrow. God bless you.